Welcome to the continuation of a series we've called Enough is Enough. More on that in a moment. First, though, I'm excited that we're just a few weeks away from reopening our physical locations. So we're planning to open the doors of both Newark and West Wilmington the weekend of July 11th and 12th. And if you want more information about that, you can check out a message from me on our YouTube page with more details. We're closely monitoring what's happening in our region with COVID-19, so our plans are open to change if needed. But I'm so looking forward to gathering in person again. I can't wait. We need to be around each other so that we can remember what it means to be human together. People of every background, color, and age worshiping together in this season. That's part of the healing and the hope that we all need. Well, this series is all about our insecurities. And before you write me off on that, I bet you have some. I know I do. And what we do with our insecurities matters a lot more than we might think, because left unaddressed, they can hold us back from everything good God has for us. But when we find real security, we're free to enjoy a rich and satisfying life. And to experience that, we have to get to the place where we look our insecurities in the eye and say, okay, enough really is enough. One of the things that feeds our insecurity is something called comparison. So let me ask you today, do you ever compare yourself to other people? Do people in your life compare you to other people? Maybe you've heard this growing up, why can't you be more like your sister? I struggle with this at times. I start looking at people who are maybe more outgoing than me, more funny or famous or awesome, and I feel inferior. I look at people who have more money than I do, or maybe use their money better than I do, and I feel inadequate. I look at people who know how to relax when I'm wound up and have so much to do, and I feel envious. I look at people who have it all together or seem to, and I feel ashamed of my imperfections. And here's what I'm learning. It's so tempting in those moments to fall into that comparison trap. But when we do, we lose our ability to connect. So what happens? We get more isolated and frustrated and self-righteous and judgmental, and we don't realize comparison is creating jealousy inside of us. But what are we supposed to do? Well, I've been drawn lately to the story of two guys in the Old Testament of the Bible, Saul and David. They were both leaders, both kings, but Saul was deeply insecure and David was deeply secure. That was the big difference between them. During this series, we're looking at Saul's life to see how insecurity gets an inroad into our own stories. In a few weeks, we'll talk about how to find security like David, but in the meantime, be prepared because Saul's story is a train wreck. And if you're new to church or the Bible, some of what I'll talk about today may be new to you, but I think you'll pick up on it. And if you're a follower of Jesus, this may be a word for you. Because deep inside of all of us lives a Saul, a secretly insecure person who, allowed to run rampant, will control our lives. But deep inside of all of us also lives a David, a courageous, humble but confident person who, encouraged and affirmed, can experience so much good. The question is, which will we lean toward? So here's how Saul and David's stories intersect. After Saul has been king for a while, David arrives on the scene, just a kid in his teens, rough around the edges, but ready to charge hell with a water pistol. And you've probably heard the story. David kills Goliath, this giant champion of the Philistines, an enemy nation. And in recognition of that, Saul makes David one of his military commanders. And here's what we read. Whatever Saul asked David to do, David did it successfully. So Saul made him a commander over the men of war, an appointment that was welcomed by the people and Saul's officers alike. Clearly, David's a stud, right? The thing is, so is Saul. He's king. And this relationship between Saul and David starts out well. Saul recognizes David's giftedness, gives him an opportunity, and David excels at the opportunity he's given. But then David starts to get a little too successful. When the victorious Israelite army was returning home after David had killed Goliath, women from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. Here's the picture. Saul's army's coming home after finishing this battle. People are lining the streets in celebration, specifically women from all over Israel. It's like one of those old news films from the end of World War II when soldiers are coming home and women are hugging and kissing them in the streets. Confetti is raining down. It's a celebration. The only problem is this was their song. Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. This made Saul very angry. Have you had this experience where maybe someone you hired or you were friends with when they were a nobody, or you gave birth to or coached or gave advice to in the past, becomes better at something than you? I've had that experience, and I celebrate it. And every once in a while, I struggle with it. And I have to go to Jesus and someone who knows me and get my brain right. But Saul doesn't do that, sadly. He lets a moment of jealousy get him very angry. Did you know unresolved anger is often a sign of unaddressed insecurity? And in our culture right now, angry is kind of in. So anger isn't always bad. It's okay to get angry sometimes for the right reasons. That's human. But unresolved anger is the trap. And here's the thing, it's easier. Anybody can just stay mad at other people. That means I don't have to listen, consider someone else's point of view, confront my own fears and biases. And that's a Saul spirit. And the root of it, insecurity. It's the comparison thing. What's this, Saul said? They credit David with 10,000s and me with only thousands. Next thing you know, they'll be making him their king. Spoiler alert, Saul's right. Eventually, Israel will make David king. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it starts here. What's this? Saul asks. Now, question, who's he talking to? Well, the answer is himself, because that's who we talk to when we're comparing. We don't talk honestly with other people who would gently set us straight. No, we just have conversations in our own heads with the one person least qualified to call us out on our pettiness and jealousy, us. So have you had a what's this moment lately? Someone who's wronged you in the past gets some attention and you kind of pounce on that. It's not right. Someone you don't like doesn't pull their weight but gets promoted ahead of you and it just eats away at you. Family member bought a new car and yours is 13 years old and the air conditioning doesn't work, right? What's this? New boss is young and cocky and changing everything at work, and worse, people think it's working. Or maybe you and your neighbor both have pools in your backyard. The only difference is theirs doesn't have to be inflated. What's this? Have you had a moment like that? And the people around us in those moments don't help because they sing songs about the very people we're jealous of. They press like on the people we're jealous of. They suck up to the people we're jealous of. David has killed his 10,000s. Oh. And what happens, we can't see our thousands because somebody else's 10,000s are in the way. Some of us dads feel that way. Like we're never enough compared to someone who works more hours or makes more money or is more handy around the house. Someone whose kids behave like little angels all the time. Hey, it's time to tell comparison. Enough is enough. Because here's what you need to know about Saul. He didn't even want to be king originally. Now he is king and he's successful. He's won many battles, killed thousands. It's just that right now, David seems more successful and Saul can't stand it. So from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Our insecurities will cheat us out of so much. What are yours cheating you out of right now? You can't think straight. You can't focus. You can't reach your own potential. Guess what? Keeping one jealous eye on David makes Saul half blind. Think about that. He's half blind to his own opportunities, his own resources, his own relationships, his own blessings, his own success. Saul has so much to be grateful for, but he can't see it because he's too busy keeping a jealous eye on someone else. Who have you been keeping a jealous eye on lately? You continue to follow them on social media, even though it's toxic for your soul. You're frustrated by them. They can't do anything right in your eyes. You dislike them, and you can't even really articulate why. I bet you have someone like that in your world. Now, maybe you're thinking two things. Number one, dude, how do you know what I'm thinking? And the answer is because I'm probably more like you than you realize. And then maybe two, you're thinking, so what? So I'm a little jealous. I don't even think that's what it is, but whatever. Why make such a big deal out of it? The person I can't stand really is a jerk. What's the issue? Well, the issue is what happens next for Saul. Listen to this. The very next day, a tormenting spirit from God overwhelmed Saul, and he began to rave in his house like a madman. If you're new to the Bible, you might be going, what? God sends tormenting spirits to people? If you're not new to the Bible, you might be going, what? God sends tormenting spirits to people? In fact, let's be honest, I'm a pastor, and when I read this, I was going, what? Here's the deal. Saul gives in so completely to his jealousy toward David that God allows this tormenting spirit to overwhelm him. And Saul becomes unhinged. He's raving in his house. I can't believe this David guy. You can hear him, right? He thinks he's so great. Why can't everybody else see that he's a fraud? Here's the tough reality. Sometimes God will let us keep what we insist on giving into. So if we start keeping a jealous eye on someone instead of both eyes on Jesus, God will let us spiral. He'll let us experience the torment that jealousy brings in hopes that we'll hate it enough to eventually say, enough is enough. Can I tell you, jealousy is a spirit. How else do you explain how bizarrely we react when it has us in its clutches? And we might wonder, why is God allowing me to feel this? Well, the truth is he won't heal our insecurity as long as we cling to the jealousy that fuels it. We're going to have to let go. God won't perform surgery on your soul until you admit you need the procedure. So in his grace, he allows that tormenting spirit to trouble us in hopes that the pain will lead us to a place where we finally say, enough is enough. And we allow ourselves to be wheeled into God's operating room. And we let our Father in heaven peel back our chests and clear the arteries of their dysfunctional, petty thinking and heal our hearts and set us free. Insecurity creates comparison. Comparison left unchecked leads to jealousy. And jealousy will eventually cause us to rave like madmen. But it doesn't have to be that way. When we decide by God's grace, enough is enough. And I think there's a lot of this in our culture right now. We're keeping a jealous eye on each other, which means what matters is getting blurry. We are comparing and complaining and calling each other out for the slightest thing. It's a sign of our smallness when we can't listen to someone else's point of view, disagree, and still make space for that person in our lives. So as a result, there's a tormenting spirit at work in a lot of people's lives right now, wreaking havoc on relationships and our basic human unity. Why? Because we opened the door to it. We chose raving about our opinions from the safety of our castles like a Saul, instead of running arm in arm together toward the real Goliaths like a David. So Goliath is winning right now, because believers stop fighting the giants of hatred and faithlessness and racism and shame and anger, which aren't people at the end of the day, they're spirits, and we've started fighting each other. We need some Davids who recognize who the real enemy is. See, David wants to defeat Goliath because he has both eyes on God and he can see the real threat. Saul wants to tear down David because he has a jealous eye on David and can't perceive the true battle. Who's your enemy? You sure you're looking at the right one? Hey, enough is enough. I'm not your enemy, you're not mine. That person you can't stand right now probably isn't your real enemy either. But there is an enemy. There is a Goliath, and he loves it when you and I get a Saul spirit toward each other. We make the devil's job easy. He's chilling by the pool while we do his dirty work. And we get ripped off in the process because all we end up with is strained relationships and a lot of torment. If only Saul had joined a J group. Seriously, if only he had someone in his life who could say, Saul, come on, open your eyes. David's not your real enemy. His success doesn't diminish yours. You're just jealous because you've forgotten who you are to God. But what are the signs that jealousy has invaded our lives? I want to give you two. First, we compare ourselves to others. Saul could have connected with David. He could have encouraged and supported him, but instead he compared and competed. So David's success tormented him. What happens when we don't feel great about ourselves? When we don't like what we see in the mirror or in the hidden places of our own habits or homes or hearts, and we don't take that to God? Well, we tend to do one of two things instead. We either comfort ourselves by comparing ourselves to people who seem inferior to us. So the most insecure thing to do is to look down on someone else. Or we torment ourselves by comparing ourselves to people who seem superior to us, people who are getting more likes, more attention, more something. We may not love the way our bodies look, but at least we're not as out of shape as that guy. Our car may not be brand new, but at least it's not as beat up as hers. We don't have a lot of friends, but we're not nearly as much of a loner as they are. Inferior. Or, must be nice to look like that, but I wouldn't go around showing it off like he does. She thinks she's something, doesn't she? Always sharing her opinion and all those heart emojis. Yuck. Superior. And all of that comes from simply not realizing who we are in God's eyes. Listen, we drift from the person and presence of Jesus. We get our eyes off the truth that God loved us so much that he gave his son to save us and to make us right with him. But when we can begin to see who we are to God and that becomes enough, then there's no need to compare anymore. Second, when jealousy invades our lives, we can't celebrate others' success. Remember the song? Saul has killed his thousands. David has killed his tens of thousands. Saul can't celebrate that. And the crazy thing is, people are praising Saul. He's killed his thousands, but he can't hear it above the sound of somebody else's success. What are you doing well at right now? But you can't hear God's affirmation above the sound of someone else's success ringing in your ears. So you've become a criticizer instead of a celebrator. When someone says, hey, did you hear about John? His company has taken off. They're going to double their revenue this year. You think immediately, oh no, I have to keep up with John. John is doing better than me. He's my competition. Instead of, way to go for John. That's awesome. I celebrate that. Now back to God's plan for me. There was a time in Saul's life when it would have been very gratifying to be celebrated for his thousands. But now it feels like a slight because it makes him second to David, and he can't stand that. What diminishes our success is when we start to keep a jealous eye on someone else's. Nobody else's success diminishes yours. Celebrating someone else doesn't make you less than them. It actually frees you to experience your own success. So ask yourself, why does someone else's success have so much influence on the way I see my own? Who told you God has a limited supply of goodness and he either shows it to you or someone else? And then what if you paused right now, got your eyes off of everybody and everything else, and just thanked God for what he's doing that's good in your life? No comparison, just gratitude. Not one eye on Jesus and one jealous eye on someone else, but both eyes on Jesus. And then what if you took it a step further? I mean, you want to be really courageous? What if you texted or called someone you felt jealous toward and celebrated their success? That would be so hard for your pride, but so good for your soul. Not being happy being second is exactly what will disqualify you from ever being first. But when you stop comparing and you start connecting and celebrating, God sees that you can be trusted with more. And we see security in the life of Jesus. There's a moment right after Jesus has performed one of his most extraordinary miracles, feeding a crowd with one kid's lunch, and the crowd wants to make him king, but he knows it isn't time. So when Jesus saw that they were ready to force him to be their king, he slipped away into the hills by himself. He had the humility to wait, to let someone else succeed. Why? Because Jesus knew who he was. He knew who he was in his Father's eyes. He didn't need to compare himself to anybody else or scratch and claw to be first or to be king or to be recognized or to be right. And now we know he's king of all kings. Because that's how God tends to reward those who don't need to succeed to prove themselves out of insecurity. And that's what frees us from comparing. It's what frees us to celebrate other people's success when we see ourselves the way God sees us through our faith in Jesus. So let's declare it. Enough is enough. Time to get both eyes on Jesus and what he's calling you to do. You're not going to stand before Jesus someday and him say, "Why weren't you more like so-and-so?" He's only going to ask, "Were you fully the you that I called you to be?" Enough is enough. And if you want that freedom in your life right now, I want to invite you to pray a prayer with me that David, the secure king, prayed. It goes like this: "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life." Security can never be found by looking at others and deciding you're enough compared to them. It can't even be found by just looking at yourself and deciding that you're enough. But you can find security by looking to Jesus and believing in what he's done and in who he is, and that makes you enough in the eyes of God. And if you want that security today for your soul, right where you are, I want to encourage you to pray with me. You can use my words if it helps you, but pray with faith in your heart. Whisper out a prayer to God, something like this: "Jesus, today I turn my eyes towards you. I look away from everyone I've been comparing myself to and even from myself. And I look to you, Jesus. I look to you to forgive me. I look to you to save me. I look to you to lead me. From this moment on, I'm going to follow you."